Welcome everyone to India Food Systems Youth Network's session with Dr. Shambu. Before I introduce our speaker for today, I would like to share a few things so that this session becomes more engaging for all of us and we make most out of this session. I hope you are able to see my screen. Yes. Great.
Yes, for sure.
So please, remember a few things before we start. Rename yourself correctly. Your names will be taken as an attendance for our India Food Systems Bell system. We will celebrate those who are actively participating with India Food Systems activities. You can also ask questions, of course. No session without asking questions is complete. Please feel free to ask the question at the end of the session or use chat box to store them so that Dr. Shambhu can take them up at the end of the session. And of course, please do engage in conversation when given chance to. And if you have any queries at the later stage, you can write to us at FST Hackathon 2026 at tdu.aud.in. So moving ahead, let me please introduce our speaker for today. Dr. Dr. C. Shambu Prasad is a professor at Institute of Rural Management, Anand, where his work sits at the intersection of science and technology studies, agroecology, and rural livelihoods. He has spent over 2 decades of researching how knowledge gets produced, valued, and ignored in India's food and farming systems, and how that it take and what it takes to change it. His recent work includes studying on managing sustainable transition in Indian agriculture, reskilling youth for agri-food futures, and the role of learning alliance in scaling agroecological practice. He has curated a unique resource in smallfarmincomes.in, a platform that carries over 90 blogs by farmers, students, and field practitioners from across India. A Fulbright Fellow and IIT Delhi alumnus, he collaborates actively with several networks working on food systems and sustainable transition in India, and is committed to conversation that bridge the agrarian world and the classroom. Dr. Shambhu comes with great experience in the field around the food system, and India Food Systems is very excited. Dr. Shambhu has been one of the support people in in ensuring that our network member learn and build knowledge around food systems. We are very happy to have you, Dr. Shambhu. Thank you so much for making the time, and the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot, Vishal, and all at TDU and the partner institutions in creating a very interesting network of youth on food systems. So I'm very happy to be part of this conversation. Let me just try and share my screen. I hope you're able to see it.
Yes, Professor Shambu.
Okay. Okay, so the topic I've chosen today is just reversing this issue of food for thought, which is a common thing that we have. So we are talking about thought for food. So this is an opportunity for us to think around what goes into the food and probably introduce this idea that we need to look at food as systems. And I think perhaps in the Indian context, this becomes all the more important because sometimes we have been, fragmented and over specialized in terms of the work we do. And one of the challenges that we have is often people don't talk enough to each other. So sometimes it takes an outsider to bring about these conversations. So you have people with an agriculture background specializing in agronomy, probably not looking enough on the nutrition side. The people with nutrition not looking at possibly what's happening on the farmer's side. People involved in production not looking at what's happening in marketing and so on. So yeah, I'm not an expert on agriculture. That's not my training, nor am I an expert in nutrition. I work on the intersection of science, technology, and society, but I have been engaged with agriculture for nearly more than 2 decades, you know, and I hope to share some bits here. So I'd like to start by encouraging us to look at a few questions, and I would encourage you to respond to them as you can think in the chat. Uh, but just to let you know that we are a young university. We just became a university about a year back, and we had a project called the Small Farm Incomes, and a fair bit of learning, including with many youngsters, actually came out through that project, which completed about a couple of years back, and that's the logo of the Small Farm Incomes. So, if I were to just encourage all of you to take a minute and just try, don't overthink. Just type one word in the chat box. If you were to think about your last meal that you had, maybe the lunch today or the dinner yesterday, uh, any idea who grew it? Of course, we can say farmers grew it, but would we know where it actually came from? How far has the food traveled before it reached your plate? And you know, you can answer any of these questions. What was in the soil that produced it? I hope the questions are clear, uh, and I look forward to your responses in the chat. Please feel free to write anything. We would like this to be a bit more interactive, and we can start with some of the thoughts that come to your mind immediately. Great. That's Twarita. Yeah. Excellent. All of you are going to make us feel very hungry based on your responses. There's a lot of diversity in the diet that you seem to be responding to. Okay, so thank you all for your responses. Let's just keep it at the back of our mind. Continue writing about your thoughts about it. And as we've realized that, our diet is a combination of multiple things, and maybe we can figure out, someone's very specific 1 kilometer distance of the food, uh, and so on. But we'll come back to this question a bit later, and let's keep this at the back of our mind, and let's move on. Yeah. So what we're going to talk about today is I'm going to start with a thought which is there in our minds a lot, because I think, in a sense, you might have seen certain restaurants actually changing their preferences because of the shortage of, the LPG cylinders. Yeah, but often, a crisis such as this is a good opportunity for us to also sit and reflect back in time. So it's quite possible that if we are not running around for an LPG cylinder, I'm a bit fortunate in Anand that I get piped gas supply, and many of you may also be fortunate in that way. But some of us who are more privileged can actually think about the issues relating to our system. So I'll try and make a few connections between the ongoing war in Iraq and you know and how it relates to food. And through that, we will explore this idea about how is the state of food and nutrition in the country, and how does it in the world as well, and how does it relate to the issue of sustainability. So, in a sense, we're going to ask ourselves, what is it that lies behind your plate? And and then we will try and understand this from an important stakeholder in the food system, the farmers, and how they look at all of it. And then look at possibly a few interesting examples of youngsters who have created change in food systems through their initiatives, and potentially what you could do as part of the youth network in taking this forward. So, so let's just look at this issue of war and our plate. The Strait of Hormuz is a small part in between Iran and Oman, and it's about 3,000 kilometers away. We have seen an immediate impact on LPG cylinders. But if you look more closely, I think 30% of the global fertilizer trade goes through this particular strait. In India today, fertilizer plants are running at 60 to 70% capacity because they're not able to get the natural gas and other things from which is highly imported. And the prices of many of our fertilizers and nutrients, especially on potash and murate, etc., have gone up already by 10 to 20%. So you look at the picture at the right, I think, 5 of India's top 10 fertilizer sources are coming from West Asia. And India probably imports close to about 40% of imported urea from West Asia. This is also a case that some of you did mention basmati rice. We export a fair bit of it. Iran and other countries in the Gulf are importing quite a bit, but I think they've got stuck and stranded at different places. Now we look at this issue of fertilizers a bit more, and urea is a significant part of this. What we realize is that the government has frozen the urea prices at, rupees 5,000, about 6,000 per ton since 2012. So the urea prices haven't increased, but at the same time, the DAP prices and the murate of potash has actually gone up 4 times. So there's a bit of imbalance in the way we are using fertilizers, and that's reflecting on people's soils and finally on our food as well. So the question of asking this interesting point of where does your food come from relates to a concept known as food miles. And I think, if we were to examine this rather closely and look at all the ingredients that go into our daily diet or a meal, we could actually compute how far these things are coming from. So when we have some apples that are coming possibly from, the exciting, very shiny Washington apples, which probably come from New Zealand or from US, or Mr. Bumrah advertising pistachios that are coming from California, I think these are things that we may want to look at. A few days back, while talking to our students about a producer organization or a farmer producer organization that's based in Anantapur district in Andhra Pradesh, it's called the Dharani Farmer Producer Organization. And I think what we realized there is that this organization has chosen not to sell its produce in a radius of more than 300 to 350 kilometers. So in a sense, there is something known as the slow food movement, And it might be worth looking at this trend which is there internationally and also nationally, because how do we reconnect with our food is one of the things that the war has told us. More specifically, if we were to look at what's happening on war, and there was a very interesting piece by Mr. Ramanjanelu, who talked about India being the Urea Republic. What started off in the Green Revolution as a situation and a response to famine about 50 years back has actually resulted in a serious soil, water, and an ecological kind of crisis. An ideal way on the farm, the ratio between nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium should be in the probably 4:2:1. But what we are doing today is somewhere between 6.5:3:1 and so on. So there is a significant imbalance here. And, there is no clear response to the way we are responding to the prices increasing elsewhere. So as a result, the cost of this, of maintaining our food security to the exchequer is close to 2 to 2.5 lakh crores, not a small amount. And if you look at the union budget, it's actually the amount that we spend on subsidizing for fertilizers is actually higher than the budget of the Ministry of Health, just to put that in perspective. So while we are food secure, India is no more having to deal with getting food and wheat and other things from other nations. This has not come at a low cost. So, in some sense, we probably are not Atmanirbhar in the sense we have to depend a lot on the fertilizers and other things coming from outside, and we become part of the industrial food system that has enhanced the linkages that we are talking about. And at the same time, we have a declining soil organic carbon over a period that has happened, and so on. A report I would encourage you to look at, which came out a few months back, is the state of food security and nutrition in the world, which the FAO brings out every year. I won't go through the details here. Basically, the important part is the recognition that all nations are significantly behind the Sustainable Development Goal of number 2, which is to end hunger by 2030. So there's a serious affordability crisis in terms of what we need to be doing. And stunting and wasted children, a large number of them come from low, medium income countries. And we also have an obesity problem, which is increasing. The anemia among women is also increasing. And the food aid is actually a very small part of the total aid that we are looking at. So there was a report probably a year or so back, that 70% of Indians can't afford a healthy diet. And that's a bit of a concern. So you can be food secure, but you're not necessarily nutrition secure. So I think food security and nutrition needs to go together. There's been some work in trying to look at, is the rice that we eat today the same as what our grandparents used to eat? The answer is no. And we just take rice, I think it's lower in calcium by 45%. In terms of iron, down by close to 30%, lower by zinc by about a third. And unfortunately, the arsenic content in rice has actually increased nearly 1500%. So one option might be to say, okay, let's fortify the rice. And, that's something that's being tried by the government as well into biofortification of rice. But that probably is not the answer. And I think a serious issue about the quality of nutrition is actually interlinked to the quality of soil. And that's part of the process of industrial agriculture and in what we do to our microorganisms. that have been transferring minerals from earth to plant to food and finally to the body. So very briefly, the picture on the right that you see is an indication of the fact that unlike other systems where you see, industrial systems or even transport systems spewing smoke and where you can see unsustainability very upfront, agriculture, which seems a very benign kind of activity, actually has a significant contribution to global unsustainability. More particularly so in the amount of freshwater withdrawals, 70% globally, and in India, it could be close to 80 to 90%. And in many cases, this is linked to a free power, so there's no incentive to save water, even as aquifers have been depleting at a rapid rate. We'll skip some of the details, but the basic point we want to suggest to you is that, food lies at the heart of tackling big issues of global warming, climate change, and importantly, reducing water stress as well. Now, this concept of food has been discussed a lot in the concept of what is known as food systems. And we'll come back to this a bit later. The two diagrams here are taken from the high-level committee of experts from the FAO, which talks about how these various elements are linked and to issues of availability, access, and utilization. And the one on the right, which is about sustainable food systems, talks about the food system actually comprising of several subsystems, and it's not a good idea to look at it in terms of an isolation. You often look at what is known as an agricultural value chain, which looks at something that is somewhat linear. But the important part of both these perspectives, and we'll skip the details for the presentation today, is to indicate to us that while thinking about food systems, the word systems suggests to us that we have to think in terms of interrelatedness, as you can see in the picture on the left, and also levels at which you're looking, which might include the waste systems as well. The previous slide, when we talked about eutrophication and the oceans getting spoiled, a large part of it is due to the nutrient runoff that happens from agriculture. So I think these interrelated elements is something that we might want to look at a bit more closely when we think about food systems. So in some sense, the simple way of looking at food systems is what do we produce, what we grow and how we grow it, and how do we process it. This includes different kinds of value chains and how do we transform it into foods, into processed foods. How do we distribute it? The markets, logistics, and access. So there's an argument that there's enough food in the world, but we don't seem to handle the distribution aspect and access issues of people. And then how do we consume it in terms of diets, nutrition, and waste? So a sustainable food system, and therefore we move from food systems to sustainable food systems, is how can we enable all of this so that we also keep in mind the demands of future generations. Therefore, economic viability has to go along with issues of environmental integrity, social equity, and cultural resilience. Let's just pause a bit into something that perhaps many of you are somewhat aware of, but it's the important role of the microbial organisms that actually are at the heart of many things that feed us. Again, a very interesting article by Mr. Ramanjnelu, and you can follow him on LinkedIn. He's got an article called the Sustainability Matters newsletter. And just like the Urea Republic, he'd written a very interesting piece on the invisible world that feeds us. And one of the things that you talk about is the very idea that the soil microbiome, actually a teaspoon of healthy soil has actually more microbes than people on earth. It's in terms of billions in some sense. And when we apply synthetic fertilizers indiscriminately, um, we destroy this community, and it takes a while for it to regenerate. An important role played by roots is to recruit these microbes to access minerals. So if a soil is depleted, we end up with a nutritionally hollow food. So high yielding varieties might produce more, but actually can weaken this partnership between the plant and the soil. And then if you go to livestock, again, it's actually what they digest that actually feeds what an animal eats. And the animal is, in some sense, a biological connector between the field and the kitchen. And then it goes to the human gut, where preferably, if you have many of these microorganisms coming into your food system, you enhance your immunity and you have lesser side effects and so on. So, dietary diversity is important. And this dietary diversity, the heart of it is actually in the soil microbiome. Recently, an ex-colleague of ours, Deborah Datta, who does a lot of fascinating work on agriculture, wrote a lovely piece called "How Do You Curate a Buffet for Bacteria?" And this was, of course, in Canada, where people were talking about, suppose I want to create a dinner for bacteria. And there was a person, an expert in compost, who actually talked about it. And I think bringing that focus back into what we feed and what goes into it can actually, you feed the soil feeds the plant, and that's how we get our food. And this interconnection is something that we might want to remind ourselves about. Now, stepping back a little bit, Amrita Hazra, who teaches at the Indian Institute for Science and Educational Research at Pune, ISER, points to the fact that despite this idea that you have of the central role that food and farming systems plays in our everyday and academic lives, all theoretical and practical aspects of farming are designated to the syllabi of only agricultural institutes. And I think that's one of the things that we may want to try and explore, because farming sits at the intersection of many disciplines, but we seem to be doing it in fragments. So sometimes the wall between agronomy and nutrition is slightly artificial, and we may want to try and break that, so to speak. So let's now look at the farmer's world. What you see on the left is a slogan that was probably used in the farm law struggles. And what it says is, चीर के जमीन को मैं बोता हूं, मैं किसान हूं, चैन से कहीं कहां सोता हूं. So a lot of work that goes into the work of making the food, and the returns is not so exciting. And that was part of the reasons behind this protest. So just to get a sense about the fact that India today has potentially the largest farming community in the world. So food for us is very strongly linked to the issue of cultivation and farmers' livelihoods. So you look at the comparison between India and America, we have about 150 million farmers, and America has less than 2 million farmers. And their average size is 466 acres, and ours is about 2.5 acres. And 54% of all rural households are agricultural. And the important thing that we shouldn't forget is that while the farming population has kind of gone up and down, the number of laborers have increased. And not all these laborers have been able to be absorbed in the industrial sector. And there's often a movement from, agriculture to industry and back, so to speak. So tenant farmers and sharecroppers are cultivating significant portions of the land in many states. They vary from about 20 to 50 or even higher. And importantly, most of the agriculture done in India today is done by women. Let's not forget that this year is the International Year of the Women Farmer. And when we talk about the farmer, let's move away from the image of a male farmer driving his tractor And it's actually a contribution by many women across. And many of these women are not counted as farmers because they don't have land rights. Less than 13% of the farm women, seem to have rights in their own names. And this is important while we're talking about the Women Reservation Bill, but hopefully sometime these issues would also come up. The Indian story of a farmer is something that has been going on since 1925 onwards. An Indian farmer is born in debt, lives in debt, dies in debt, is what Malcolm Darling had spoken of in 1925. And the picture hasn't changed much in recent times. 52% of agricultural households across India are still in debt. And let's take the states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, which are advanced agriculturally. They have a good network of banks, a very strong self-help group movement, many microfinance institutions here, but over 90% of farm households in these two states are indebted. So more credit seems to be going through the same broken architecture. It doesn't seem to resolve it. And there is a significant crisis. A calculation that was made by the Center for Sustainable Agriculture on what is it that farmers actually face. 83% of Indian farm households earn approximately about 5,000 rupee a month. This was from the NABARD situational assessment survey in 2017. It might cost a farmer 2,100 rupees a quintal to produce a quintal of rice, and he or she could get about 1,400 or so. So what is actually at stake here is the livelihoods of farmers. So there are many dilemmas that a farmer faces. Input costs have increased over a period of time nearly 3 times, but the output prices haven't kept pace. Credit is inaccessible in many cases. Climate shocks have compounded the fertilizer and market crisis. Many have left staple crops to cash crops. There's a greater vulnerability and many other things. And we will come back to this issue of ways by which people are actually providing solutions to this situation.
अब तो देखो दिन चला गया तो फिर मतलब अब ये तो
Yeah.
कीड़े
So there is a trap that we often have, and many of the agricultural colleges and all of them say the only solution for India is to improve its productivity. Indian average is lower than elsewhere, so therefore go for more yields. And the possibility of having more yields is only to better seeds or perhaps moving into precision agriculture and a better transfer of technology from the research to the farm. And much of this is couched into what we will talk about in terms of the green revolution paradigm. And public policy in trying to support this has been premised on the issues about minimum support price, loan waivers, input subsidies, and free power. And this happens, it's very difficult to try and get over this kind of an issue. But I think we are facing a serious crisis in India. Fertilizer prices going up and so on. And that's not leaving enough investment to do the other kinds of things that we're talking about. So what is the kind of transition that we actually need and for whom? Richa Kumar and I put together a special issue on managing sustainable transitions in agriculture, which was published in the International Journal of Rural Management, where we have addressed this a little bit more. Broadly speaking, today when we talk about agriculture, we have to understand that the crisis that we have, which was successful maybe 40, 50 years back, has probably run its course. And it's important for us to talk about a newer paradigm of agriculture, which has been broadly termed in terms of agroecology. And I won't run through all the details of it, but essentially, The new paradigm is talking about moving away from synthetic inputs into biological processes, moving away from soil physics and chemistry into soil biology, understanding roots more importantly, exploring potential of biodiversity, increasing resilience by building on farmers' knowledge, which some scholars have said they've got de-skilled over a period of time, and looking at other kinds of opportunities in terms of nutritional diversity and looking at things in terms of whole systems and how the system can actually be co-created with farmers. So this is not a technical change, but a transformation of values and power as well. So we'll jump a little bit into some of the work we've looked at on how could youth be involved in this process. And one of the interesting experiments that happened in the state of Andhra Pradesh a few years back was through the Raitu Sadhikara Samstha, which created a fellowship program for those who could take up natural farming, attracting students from agriculture and horticultural universities, both from Andhra Pradesh and elsewhere, and putting them in farmers' fields for over a year. And we did some interviews with them. And, it's important to realize that they were not taught much of this in their traditional agricultural curriculum. And they had to start looking at newer ways of doing things. And in the process, they actually provided some amazing results by staying with farmers, learning with farmers, rather than just merely delivering packages of practices to them. So there was a two-way kind of interactions. And I think the new generation of leaders that we're talking about are people like you who can stay with this kind of complexity, listen to farmers, and work across the science practice divide. We see in this case that the many people who are already doing this, I will refer to a very interesting book that has come out. It's called Cultivating Hope, brought out by Deborah Datta and Hazra, who talk about various kinds of experiments that they have documented of people creating opportunities for agriculture in curriculum in different parts of India. Suvarna Lata having done it with linking girls' education with food sovereignty. Again, Shantu bringing it out in an educational campus. And some experiments we did in the small farm incomes group where some of our researchers went and visited farmers' fields, brought out a large number of blogs in English first and later even in Gujarati and Hindi. So these are peers who are willing to work together. In some sense, there are existing networks and platforms. The youth network is a great opportunity for us to learn from each other. And, there are ways by which youngsters can actually take a great leap in some of the things that are happening here. So what I'd like to leave with you is a few questions that we can talk about. You know, in a sense, what is it that you could do? This is not something that can happen in a few weeks or few months, but maybe the idea through the network and through many of these talks is to seed some ideas into your minds, and with the right soil around the kinds of networks, the right kinds of peers, the mentors that you have, the opportunity for you to take on experiments in different areas would actually help make a difference. The first is you could try and do a bit of research, either as part of your dissertations, where you bring in these concepts of soil health, food sovereignty, and agroecological nutrition into the kind of work that you're doing. Importantly, try and go and visit a few fields, a farmer's fields. Trace where your food is coming from. Whenever you have an opportunity, go and listen to farmers. Don't look at them as passive recipients of the knowledge that you have learned in universities, but also try and talk to them and listen to them. And I think one of the challenges that we figured out is actually there's a lot of interesting ideas floating around. There's a lot of unwritten stories that we actually have to document. So, can we make those invisible stories that are very local to come out and shared more, amongst this kind of a network? So, can we actually, through this network, work around these blocks, and we could try and think about how to make this happen. So, how do we document what's happening in your food systems using your skills? And keep asking questions of every nutrition recommendation. If you are a nutritionist, what agricultural system does this assume? Is the system equitable, ecological, and sustainable? And maybe when you are moving in your journey, you might want to explore in terms of your internships, or your dissertations, or your first jobs. They actually could shape what you do and how you become. So I'd like to leave with you a very interesting quote by Wendell Berry, a poet and a farmer, whose writings are very inspiring, and I hope you have an opportunity to read some of his works. And one of the quotes is there, which says, "Eating is an agricultural act. The food that we eat is an agricultural act that helps us think about the soil microbiome, the farmer's margins, the credit trap possibly that the farmer is part of, the subsidies that go into urea and make things while we eat it, but there's something that's missing. The process of industrial agriculture that leads to continuous deskilling of farmers and nutritionists, and also the people who are actually bringing about change and trying to do something different." Uh, this book, and I can share the link with you, it's called Cultivating Hope, Exploring Food Growing Possibilities in Indian Cities, is one way by which you can look at it. And essentially, when we're talking about this and drawing from that, there are certain values that are predominant and which we need to, treasure, which already exist in some cases in our households. What is it that we believe about food? A good concept about the fact that you don't waste food. What do we believe about farming and our relationship to nature? And how does education play a part in strengthening these? There are long-term issues with regard to the subsidy architectures, the procurement systems, etc. Of course, this requires a lot of political will and might be much slower to work on. But as consumers and part of the markets that we have, and the word that's often used is that of, can we be conscious consumers? We may want to ask these questions: who captures value? Who has access to it? And what kinds of signals reach producers? And the important part is to reflect on knowledge systems. What counts as legitimate knowledge? Who is a knower? How do we try and combine the scientific knowledge that we have with the indigenous knowledge that is there with communities? And your generation has probably the most direct agency here, that you could avoid making the mistakes that had happened earlier. And when we are talking about a collaboration with the Transdisciplinary University, which has done some very interesting experiments in trying to combine these knowledge systems, uh, the scope is really vast. A few pictures from the book on Cultivating Hope, potentially saying that even if I'm in a city, there are many things that you could do in terms of urban gardens and so on. Agriculture doesn't have to be only rural, uh, which doesn't mean that what you grow here is actually going to feed the world. But I think it's a way of expressing yourself, and it's a way of literally dirtying your hands. And it took me a long while to dirty my hands, and I still think I'm way behind. But I think the sooner you're able to dirty your hands, I did a lot of work on the system of rice intensification. But it was after a long while, we ate a lot of rice, but it's only by going to the field and walking in these puddled rice fields that I learned things can be very different. Uh, So maybe one of the questions that you would like to take up with you is, what does it mean for a nutritionist to also be agrarian literate? I could share with you a report that we have put together as part of the Network for Rural and Agrarian Studies. And I think it's a young network of researchers, largely social scientists, who have been concerned about the fact that the studies on rural and agrarian studies have come down in many of the universities in the last 15, 20 years or so. So if you're a student of home science, what would it mean to hold the farmer in its frame as well as the consumer? I don't want to end with any kind of prescriptions, but I'd be happy to, think along with you and engage in a conversation, and happy to take up any questions or observations that you may have on the discussion that we just had. Thank you very much.
Uh, Thank you, Dr. Shambhu. This was very insightful conversation, and let's now hear from our participants if they've got any questions or any point of reflection or any ideas that they would like to share with you and have a small discussion around that for like few minutes and before we close. Please, everyone, I invite you to please keep your cameras on and you may also unmute yourself and engage with Dr. Shambhu.
Yeah, I haven't kept pace with the chat, but what I'll also try and do is share with you some of the links of the book Cultivating Hope. Um, so this is on Cultivating Hope, that I hope you will be able to access it. And, you know, I think the various blogs that we have on agriculture, that's there, which you could all access and also perhaps contribute to it at some point in time. Sometimes your field notes could also become blogs. And this is the story of the Urea Republic and Sustainability Matters. And yeah, so maybe that should do for now. And those of you interested in soil biology can follow this very interesting piece on how do you curate a buffet for microbes, for bacteria, and some of the experiments that have happened in this space. And I think some of these international experiments could also be tried out in the Indian context in your laboratories as well. Yes, Vinod, I think your hand, you've raised your hand. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, I think that is Professor Vinod.
Huria is pronounced as Huria.
Yes.
Yes. In fact, I'm familiar with the Institute of Rural Management because I worked with the National Dairy Development Board from 1983 to 1987, and then went over to the CSIR Central Food Technological Research Institute and worked there for 2 decades before I superannuated. Professor Shambhu, this session that you have taken is one of the most important sessions that I have come across recently, which emphasizes the complexity of the food system. It is not just growing food, processing, packaging, transporting, and giving it to the consumer. There's a lot of thought, and the NDDB has done a lot of work IRMA, NDDB, Amul, these institutions towards the cooperative. A lot of work has been done to organize, uh, the dairy industry. Now, what has not happened in India is to organize the other sectors of agriculture. And when we look at all the complexities of this system, I think that we have, through organizing the dairy infrastructure, we have barely scratched the surface of what is possible in this world. And food, 8.3 billion people need to be fed 3 meals a day. So you can imagine the scope, the magnitude, and how gigantic this food industry is. And you look at the entire supply chain, you can gauge how big this is, and it is unimaginable. To When you say thought for foods, you are very right, because a lot of thinking, in spite of the fact that we have worked a lot. There are institutions across the world. There are institutions in India which are working in various aspects of food, right from the farming to growing to packaging, transporting, CFTRI itself. We have done a lot of work in food technology, and I have been responsible for training food science and technology students and preparing them to join the food industry. So there's a lot of work which has been done. But what I understood today, that the whole system is so complex, and when we go deeper and deeper into research, and we are trying to gauge, how the soil microflora, the soil microbiology can play an important part. The profile of the crops, the nutritional profile of crops that are emerging today is different from what it was uh, decades ago. So things are changing. And of course, you also highlighted that war is again another factor where so much land is made unproductive. Land is the scarcest resource in this world. It can never grow beyond the planet on which we are living. Water is also scarce because saline water is available, but groundwater, the water which is used for irrigation, that is pretty scarce. So when we look at the entire complexity of the system, there is a lot of thinking that needs to go through it. We need to do, and in fact, I have just sent a link to Vishal Gautam regarding the book that I have published. It's called Food and Insightful Exploration. Vishal, you can see it, the link I just posted when the meeting started. This is a book which is available on Amazon and across the world over in 40 different um, platforms.
Thank you
It
so much, Mr. Huria, Dr. Huria, for sharing your insights and also the book. I'm sure it will be of much use, and hopefully some of the universities could also get it for their libraries. I think the challenge that we often face is that in agriculture, often we don't have the same kind of ecosystem that Dr. Kurian and others built in the dairy sector. Uh, and the investments have actually been coming down. So we work a lot in the farmer producer organization space, and we often say, where is the NDDB equivalent for that? I think there's a lot we need to work on. So may I request that we move on, and if possible, Mr. Samarth, if you don't mind, we could just open up a little bit for the younger students who may have some questions, and then we can come back to you.
Yes, yes. Samarth has something to say. Yes, Samarth, please unmute yourself and speak.
So, Vishal, I was just waiting to see if I can ask any of the others who are there who are probably a bit younger. I think we do have a experienced set of people, but any youngsters from the youth network who would like to speak? or have any questions that they have, any reflections that they have. And then we can come to Samarth.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, hello.
Please
Can I come in?
feel free to. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Shivam.
So good evening, everyone. Like it was great to hear from you, Professor. I was just having this curiosity,
Shivangi,
like
can you
when we
just
are,
introduce yourself a bit?
sorry?
Can you introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah. Yeah, so I am Shivangi. I was like recently working with RRA Network as a research associate for some time.
Sure.
And I am like officially a wild fellow. So yeah, a little bit about me. So I was just curious to know your perspective about like when we are like tackling and understanding these systemic challenges, which are very interrelated and very complex in nature. So how do we see communities? Because like looking at the community from the indigenous perspective and from a lot other perspectives, like in the current complex state of scenario, how do you see that? So just that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If it's okay, I would just like to pick up one or two more questions and we can take them together. I think the questions are more important than the answers that I may provide. If any of the others have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself. Dwarika and others, you had some comments earlier.
Hi, this was a nice presentation. This is Twarita here, and I really am looking forward to study the slides, and plus also that uh, it's a complex process of getting a food to a plate, and we don't know about the food, how it came and from where it came and what all components came from where. So I was thinking of this that after this I will be studying the slides, and then I can write something like. A blog or something like that, maybe an article or maybe like of 5-10 pages on Canva with decorative slides, and I can just publish it on my blog site, and this would give a good opportunity and plus awareness among people also. So, and plus also there were some things like farmers and all, uh, who are actually I mean that figure, 50%, or I mean like 80% of the farmers who are lacking the minimum support price, and they are growing it at a lesser cost. The input costs are great, and plus but the selling cost is lower. So in our economic terms also we can see this, that how to inculcate that in our economy, so that um, where there is equality also. Yesterday we had a webinar on equality and inequality and all. So if we like pose 2% wealth tax on rich, so we can divert it towards these farmer activities, and land is also less, so we can also see that population is large but land is less, as we saw. So we can maybe extend certain areas into agricultural land by uh, social schemes and by the government, for which that government also works for farmers. And plus for the nutrition, for the 4:2:1 ratio of phosphorus and potassium, those nutrients are dying. So certain strategies could be taken up, so that there is a conscious farming, and plus also the farmers are learned in their approach, so that the nutrient ratio is not getting affected much, and
Sure.
the food that comes to our plate is also nutritious maybe. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Dwarika. Any other questions before we get to Mr. Samarth and
There is one in the
Yes.
chat box.
Sir, I have a question.
yes,
Am I audible, sir?
yes, you are.
Yes. Sir, I'm Sonia speaking. Actually, I'm doing a PhD in Ledirwin College, sir. And
Yeah,
for me, sir, I would like to know that a little bit breakdown on sustainable food systems and also versus the sustainable diet. Like, I feel like the components are like overlapping, or how would it contribute it? Can you please, give me a little bit breakdown in an easier way?
sure. Yes,
Thank you, sir.
Sonia. Yeah. Okay, so I'll, probably just respond to the two questions by Shivangi and Sonia. So I think this issue of communities is something which is a very critical one. I don't think there are easy answers to this. The important thing is also to have a longer term engagement with the communities. And I think when we talk about communities, they're often not a homogeneous kind of group. Within a community, the older generation has a different understanding as the younger generation. Sometimes the elders know more. It's often sometimes the younger ones also pick up new ideas and they're able to bring about a bit of change. And I think usually an experiment with communities where you discuss with them in advance can actually make a difference. There are some interesting insights. For example, setting up some basic ideas. So, for example, people say you have to transit to, let's say sustainable agriculture. You've been growing fertilizer-based crops for a long while. But if you're not provided with the support structures and you say, okay, you want to move from groundnut to millets. So here, one of the organizations, the Timbuktu Collective, had said, one of the ways we'll do it is by actually insisting that at the start of the crop cycle, we'll say these are the rates which we think we can provide. So a certain sense of assurance helps farmers actually make a shift. So how do we, as either as consumers, we could do that if we are conscious consumers in terms of what is referred to as community supported agriculture, and we say we will take whatever is produced by a few farmers, and can we actually establish this link between consumers and farmers so that we get an opportunity to see each other, talk to each other, and again, in our work, actually, you know, think along with them rather than go with earlier ideas. And I think in the process of dialogue, we may start one way, but things can be a lot non-linear. And at some point in time, the community's own ideas would work. We're involved in a project in agroecology where we took an interesting experiment where it was a participatory action research where we encouraged people to go and visit each other's farms. And then we gave them these 13 principles of agroecology and asked them, you translate it in Hindi and then say, which of these things actually make sense? And then they come out with a completely different sets of ideas. So I think it's creating spaces for them to try and engage with what is known as collective experiments. And I think that is probably one way to look at it. Sonia, about the sustainable food systems and dietary issues, I'm not an expert in this space, but essentially, one of the things that if you're a research scholar, you would like to explore is that there are some very interesting, developments that have happened in the UN space with regard to Food System Summit. Of course, there are debates around it, but there are lots of documents, and this has happened in the last 5 years or so. And I think the frameworks that have come up and GIZ and the COFTI would also be engaging a lot in that. So a critical element is to do with diets as well. And as I said, there are many ways. So one opportunity is, nutritionally, if we take a typical plate, the thing that we say is this is what the diet is, this is the nutrition, and this is what the nutrition was probably 5 years back or 10 years back. And you can measure it in terms of calories. But suppose you were to say, I want to add food miles to it as well, and then work this out. How different will it probably look at? And how do we bring in, greater diversity in the food, bringing in the food miles concept, so to speak? I mean, that's just one suggestion. There could be many more. Is Samarth there? I think he wanted to speak.
I think I'm sure I feel everyone has answered the question. I mean, they had the chance to ask the question and they maybe would want to reflect more upon what they had. Uh, and likely you also have shared your email address. We also shared our network email address. If you at all feel like you want to have continued conversation on this, uh, please do write to Dr. Shambu directly or to us. We will be happy to post your questions to Dr. Shambu, or you can directly write to him, and you will get your responses from Dr. Shambu very much. I think we've had 1 hour of great discussion, Dr. Shambu, with you, and important topics of thinking beyond just eating and what we eat, looking at the larger systems is very important. The produce, the process, and the outcome of it is very important for all of us to think about. And I think what India Food Systems Youth Network is trying to do is to get young people to talk about it, think about it, and decide to take interesting small actions, which is very important. And like rightly you shared in your presentation also, what young people can do a research, write a paper, write blogs, and your initiative at Small Farms Income, which is very interesting. I encourage all of you to please go pay a visit to that platform and read as much as you can, and please also take the opportunity to write on the platform. There would be some opportunities, I'm sure of that. And as the youth network grows, we just don't want to keep this as a, like, where you come and talk and just go back home. So we will also be posting a couple of activities that you can follow based on this discussion, which will help you like go a little a step deeper into it. You will hear about the activity on the WhatsApp group already. So with that, I think we have had a very interesting conversation, Dr. Sambhu. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with the India Food Systems Youth Network today, this evening. And I'm sure people who have joined have had great time with you. Thank you for joining us. And next up, we will be having a communication workshop with one of the guest speaker present in with us in the participants, Professor Pulkit Mathur. Maybe next time you will be joining us. So we are trying to curate a series of workshop, interactive engagement webinars with experts who are doing the we're walking the talk, in fact, in the field of food systems, and it's very important to join all of them as they are building onto each other's conversation. And we look forward to having your continued participation. And Samarth, please write to us at the email address provided. We shall send you the link. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you, Dr. Shambhu. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please, as you walk different parts of your life, do think about food systems and how you can contribute to making it a just and resilient food system for all of us. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vishal and everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Shambu. It was a very, very insightful discussion and a webinar. I personally learned a lot, so it was fantastic.
Yes, we all enjoyed. Thank you.